Hey and welcome. I'm Laura of Namasturm Yoga. This is the second part in my series of how to start your own home yoga practice. Today we're going to focus on sequencing. If you are looking to create your own home yoga practice, I'm here to help you. So go ahead and unroll your mat and join me. Today's practice is going to be participative. We're going to go through a little journey of sequencing. So part one of my series of how to start your own home yoga practice was about structure. Today we're going to talk a little bit about sequencing and how to string poses together. This is helpful for anyone who is starting their own home yoga practice and just is at a loss as to figure out what to do next. But this video may also be helpful for new yoga instructors who are trying to figure out how to put together a yoga class. Sequencing does not have to be complicated. So if you have a sequence of poses that you are familiar with and that you like and you feel comfortable with, there is absolutely no reason that you can't use that. Ashtanga yoga is based on that principle. So the primary series is a set sequence of poses where you do the same poses in the same order every single time. And there is something really comforting and relaxing about knowing what's coming next so that you don't have to do a lot of mental thinking about what you're going to do. You can just be in the practice. However, if you want to change things up or choose poses that you want to do that make sense to you, you may have to think a little bit about how to pull that together for yourself. I am a proponent of creative sequencing, and I actually find that's the most enjoyable part of teaching yoga for myself, is coming up with new and creative ways to get from one pose to another without losing a sense of flow, a sense of whole, a sense of the connection. I'm a little bit of an intuitive yoga instructor, so although I sometimes will show up to a class with an idea of a pose that I want to throw in, or an idea of a transition that I want to try, or a little bit of a focus or plan, I oftentimes like to let the structure of the whole practice be discovered as I'm teaching. I find that really invigorating and freeing. It may not be for you. I do think that a lot of students really like to know what's coming next and they like that rigor, but I think a lot of other people don't like to know what's coming next. They like to be surprised and maybe find some unexpected shifts and transitions and variations that come up when a class is a little more free. There's no right or wrong way. Either way is totally fine. But today I'm just going to talk a little bit about my process when I'm sequencing a class, and both my thought process and how I use my body to help me figure out what to do next. I actually really love to change up my sequencing a lot because it can make your practice feel fresh. It can give you an opportunity to focus on the poses that you want to work on, and you don't have to feel obligated to do everything and stay in the same sequence every time. It can kind of get you out of a rut and change things up. So I'm just gonna take you through a little bit of an exploration today about the way I like to sequence a yoga practice, and I'm gonna let you in on a bit of my thought process. I hope this is useful to you. Again, you may do this completely differently, and you should, but my goal is just to sort of trigger or spark some ideas in you to get you kind of thinking both with your mind and with your body about how you can pull together some poses to create really interesting, fun, flowing sequences if that's the way you like to practice. All right, so we're gonna actually start off with a really simple warm-up because we don't wanna start going into like deeper poses before we're warm. So let's come to hands and knees and start with cat-cow. Why not? So in my previous video, I talked about sort of the structure of a practice beginning with an opening or some warm-ups. So if you take some cat-cow stretches, inhale, head and tail lift, chest and belly drop, exhale, arch the spine. This is so traditional, so common to see cat-cow stretches at the beginning of a practice because it really is a great way to warm up the body and warm up the breath and body connection. So we're working maybe with ujjayi here, Of course, there are other ways to start a practice, but I thought I would just go into something that probably everyone is already familiar with. There is absolutely nothing wrong with creating a practice that feels or seems familiar. You do not have to reinvent the wheel every time you practice yoga. So after we've done a little bit here, we want to think about, well, where could I go next? And there are some really basic poses that hands and knees go into really easily. So we could sink our hips back and go into a child's pose. From hands and knees, we could walk the hands a little forward, lower the heart down, come to our bellies, and take a little cobra pose. From hands and knees, we could walk the hands a little forward, tuck the toes, and come into a plank pose. From hands and knees, we could tuck the toes and come into a downward facing dog. So some of the real core poses can come really easily out of tabletop or cat-cow stretches. But if you want to stay on your hands and knees and maybe warm up a little longer, there's also a few options. And again, you start to think with your body, okay, what if I wanted to do a twist? Well, if I stepped my right leg out, that would anchor me so I could take the right arm up and twist open. Or alternatively, you could maybe slide your left arm behind your right hand, drop your head and shoulder down, and come to a thread the needle twist. Maybe you want to work the legs or the core a little bit here. What if you tucked your back toes and just reached the back heel to the back of the mat? Stretch through the foot, and then maybe play with a little balance. Lift that foot up, lift your left arm up. And then from here, you can work a little bit if you want to draw the elbow and knee in together and extend. And then coming back, make sure you're doing both sides. If you're doing anything one-sided, tuck in, extend, tuck in, extend. One thing that I actually kind of like to do from tabletop is with the shoulders over the wrist, tuck the toes, and just lift the knees and really engage the core here. Head reaches forward. You're activating those abdominal muscles. And then from here, keeping the shoulders over the wrists and the hips level with where they are, you could just step your feet right back to plank. Again, a strong pose here for your core. Stay with your breath. So from here, of course, we could lower down, we could roll to a side plank, but let's go to downward facing dog just to build that downward dog in today. Take a little time to pedal through the feet, bending one knee, let the opposite leg straighten. I feel like down dog is a hub, and we can use down dog as a center for almost every pose. And if we're at a loss as to what to do next in a sequence, we can always come back to down dog, whether we take a vinyasa to get here or not. So I think of this as a great central pose from which many other poses can come. Now from down dog, maybe we think, okay, well, if I were going to take a forward fold, I can walk to the top of my mat. Or to change things up, you could also walk your hands to the back of the mat. Let the heels come to the floor and just let yourself hang here. So I think the guiding principle for sequencing is we're taking part of the pose we're in with us as we go to the next pose. So here our feet are still hip distance apart. They're at the back of the mat. We moved our upper body to change into this standing forward fold. And then since we're folded, maybe now we want to actually roll to standing. So bend the knees, and we're still kind of in warm-ups here, which is the first part of your yoga practice. Now, if you're only going to do a short yoga practice, maybe you need to have already moved past the warm-ups at this stage to get into the body of the practice. But if you're still feeling like you want to warm up, maybe let yourself do a little work here. Now, from the back of the mat, we could step a foot forward and come to a lunge. So you can think about how could we work that way? Or we can come back to our forward fold and walk the hands back out, which is what I'm going to do here, coming back to downward facing dog. But again, there's options. So from where you are, think about what one body part could you move to lead you to the next pose. From here, let's take the right leg up into the air. So a good down dog split, I think, is a great way to transition to any asymmetrical pose. So anything like a lunge where one leg is forward and one leg is back. Let's step the right foot forward. Lower the left knee down, and we're just gonna do a simple low lunge here. Options with low lunge. So any pose you come into, you can keep it simple, and I do encourage that again. So maybe your arms reach up, your hips sink forward, and you keep it simple. But you can also throw in a variation. So if your body feels like, well, you know what, I did some spinal flexion, I did some twisting, but I haven't done any side stretching here. Maybe you can add a little side stretch in your low lunge by taking your left arm up, grabbing the wrist, and just gently pull yourself over to the right, so that we're now doing kind of two things at once. This one pose is serving to warm up the torso as well as the legs. Breathe. And then coming back up. Now, we want to do the other side. So it becomes a little bit more evident what we should do next after we've done the first side. But that doesn't mean we're just going to go straight back to down dog. We could, or we can take that right knee back, and maybe we'll throw in our little sort of our vinyasa here. So we can bend the elbows, lower the heart down between the hands, and maybe take a cobra pose here. So we're starting to add in some other aspects. We know we're going back to down dog. We know we want to take that second lunge, but in between, we've got a little room to play. And then from here, then you can just easily go back to down dog. Take the left leg up. So we're going to do the same thing on the second side. And then looking forward, step your left foot up. Right knee goes down. Extend the foot. Come on up. So I may not work with you 100% symmetrically today, so we may do some things on one side and then do a different sequence on the other side just to kind of demonstrate. But in general, as you're practicing, you do want to mirror what you're doing on the second side with what you did on the first side. So this one, we're going to now take those arms up, and this, again, grab the right wrist and pull over to the left. But another option would be to take something like a low lunge into a twist. So you could take your arm outside your leg, or you could plant your palm and take the left arm up. So again, there are options, but ultimately, you want to create a sequence that you can do on the second side as well. And then bring your hands back to the floor. Now, we could step back and lower down, take our cobra pose and go back to down dog again, or we can also step forward. Since we don't have to do the second side, we don't have to end up in the same pose we started with. So you tuck your back toes and step forward, and now we're at the front of our mat in the forward fold. Bring your feet together, heels slightly apart. So again, we've kept one foot in place and moved the other foot to join it. We could have gone either way. Let your upper body hang, knees soft. Maybe sway or dangle here with that upper body if you like. And then let's roll up to standing. All right, so I am a vinyasa yogi. I really like to do some sun salutations in my practice. You absolutely don't have to, but I think sun salutations come early in a practice because they really do generate some heat in the body, get us warmed up after we've done our warm-ups. So again, when I talked about the structure of a practice, I talked about like warm-ups and then moving into the body of your practice, which involves things like standing poses, standing balance poses. Maybe if you want to go deeper, getting some interesting variations or doing some arm balances or inversions. But I think that sun salutations are a really wonderful transition between the early warm-ups and the body of your practice where you're going into some deeper, strengthening, more vigorous poses. So, sun salutation is a set sequence, and that is actually really nice to have at some point, especially like if you're teaching, your students are going to be familiar with this sequence, and you want to give them something that they don't have to think about or try to process too hard. And that's also good for you, especially if you're newer to your home yoga practice and you want something that feels familiar, that doesn't create a lot of stress in trying to resolve what to do next. You want something that comes naturally. So let's do a few sun salutations here. And again, this is just going to warm us up so that we can go into some of our more creative sequencing, let's say. So palms together, inhale, reach those arms out and up. Exhale, forward fold to Uttanasana. Inhale, lift halfway. Now, Ardha Uttanasana is maybe the only pose that we have not yet done in our warm-up portion of our practice. But it's pretty simple, so I think that's okay. But I think it's nice to come into sun salutations once you've already done a plank, lowering down, once you've already done a cobra, once you've already spent some time in downward facing dog. So the body is already ready for those poses, but now stringing them all together feels like we're taking it to the next stage. Root into the hands, lift the hips, really deepen your down dog. Now that you're warmed up, it might feel like a fuller, freer pose. When you're ready, inhale, look forward. Exhale, step, walk, or hop to the top of the mat. Take a half lift again, so nice long spine here. Forward fold, reverse your swan dive, come on up, and palms together. Let's just do 2 more of these, just to let ourselves really flow. Follow the pace of your breath. Familiarity is not bad. Okay, so let's keep flowing to down dog. And remember, down dog is a little bit of a hub, and so once we get there, we're going to start to have a little fun and just play around with some different ways to order your poses. So when you arrive in downward facing dog, we're going to move to a warrior 1. You can certainly take a lot of other poses right out of down dog. I like warrior 1. Honestly, I think I use it just because it's numbered 1. It seems like it should come before the other warriors, but it doesn't have to. In any case, let's take the right leg into the air on an inhale, just as like a prep pose, and then step the right foot forward. Pivot your back, heel down, and let's come on up for a warrior 1. Now, if you are keeping, new to your own home yoga practice or wanting to keep your practice simple, spending 5 breaths in warrior 1 and then going back where you came from is a really good idea. So let's just do that here. And we're going to do some different things on each side this time through, just to play around a little bit. Now, take your hands back to the floor and you can take a vinyasa. So really simple. Nothing wrong with keeping it simple. That is a legitimate sequence. Let's take the left leg up. Inhale. Exhale, step it forward between the hands. And of course, let's take about 5 breaths in warrior 1 here as well. Of course, though, we know that warrior 1 can really easily transition to warrior 2. So maybe let yourself just open. So we're going to keep what's going on with that front leg, but we're going to open the back leg Open the hips, open the shoulders, arms out, and then take maybe 5 breaths in warrior 2. So again, really straightforward sequence. It almost seems obvious, warrior 1 to warrior 2, right? So simple. Okay, and then let's maybe just a quick reverse warrior. So you can hold this if you want to, or if you just want to use it as a really brief transition, then go ahead and make your way back through vinyasa. Once again, allowing yourself to find downward facing dog. Now, if you wanted to come back to the top of the mat again and take another vinyasa, you could if you want that more vigorous practice, or you can keep adding on from here. Once again, right leg up. And let's start the same way. So we're going to step the right foot forward, and we're going to take warrior 1 again. But this time, maybe instead of going to warrior 2, we go to warrior 3. So we're just leaning forward. Our front leg is going to stay put, but we're going to let the back leg float up. Reach through the head, reach through the heel. Of course, you always want to, then once you get into a pose, think about the alignment of the pose, really spend some time there. There are some different ways you can go with your warrior 3. But for now, let's just go ahead and step right back where we came from. Always a legitimate option to just go back where you came from. Inhale, warrior 1, and then we're going to open to warrior 2, so we can do warrior 2 on the other side. Take a couple of breaths. As I said, we're not going to be doing it exactly symmetrically today just because we're exploring, but we can take a warrior 2 over here. And then we can reverse our warrior, and then maybe this time we add an extended side angle. So again, this is a really straightforward sequence. Warrior 1 to warrior 2 to reverse warrior, and then taking an extended side angle because we've got the similar legs, so we can keep those working for ourselves. And then stretch back, reverse again, and take your vinyasa. And let's go to the left leg and see what else we can play with here. Inhale, take that left leg up. And again, we're starting the same way. So there's like this familiar starting point, but then we can just add on differently. This time, we're not going to go to warrior 3. We're just going to open to warrior 2 as we did. We're going to reverse warrior, and let's just give ourselves a couple breaths in extended side angle on this side. And then just allowing your body to think, well, where else can I go from here? We have some other options keeping our feet in this position. What if we came up and straightened our front leg and then moved into triangle pose, Trikonasana? Long sides of the body. Again, it's a logical transition, but there is not one right pose to go to next. Sometimes your body will just suggest to you, oh, hey, but this knee has been bent. Maybe it'd feel good to straighten it up for a moment. Now from here, what happens if we take the top arm overhead, strong feet into the floor, and lift the bottom hand up? So now we're doing a little core work. And then from here, you could rotate your torso, bend the front knee, and come to warrior 3 again. I'm going to bring my palms together because I don't have the room to extend my arms. Reach through the heel. So there's different ways to get to warrior 3. Now, warrior 3, last time we just stepped back to warrior 1, went back where we came from, but there are some other options here as well. So what if I just took my left fingers down to the ground and opened back up again, half moon pose? So that would be one thing to do, but you're still in another standing balance pose. You could also just step to the front of the mat and come on up, finish a sun salutation here, and then maybe go back into vinyasa. So we have some options. Let's take another vinyasa here. Let's take the right leg up on an inhale. Exhale, step it forward. We're gonna take warrior one again, back heel down, inhale, come on up. What if we wanted to, again, we've got some options for balance poses. We can take a dancer pose from here. So last time as we went into warrior three, we just lifted up that back leg. We could also lean forward, pick up the back leg and grab it with the inner, grab the inner foot with the left hand. And then lift up, find a little back bend in your dancer pose. All right, so from here, I'm gonna get a little creative, but certainly you could just step back to your warrior one. But what happens if now instead we hold on to the foot and just fold down? This is a little more challenging, but you can try it. Bring the fingers to the floor. Lift the top leg up, fold down. Now if you lose hold of your foot, just go to standing split, taking the left leg up, folding deep. And then when you're ready to let that foot go, you could step it back to warrior one, or we've got a straight front leg. So maybe we just place it back down and take a pyramid fold, folding in over that right leg. Again, work the alignment. So although we've taken something from us from the previous pose, we have to adjust what we haven't. So you may need to work to really square the hips up here once you get to your pyramid. And then pyramid somewhat naturally moves into a revolved triangle. So maybe you think, okay, well, I'm gonna lift up, take the left fingers to the ground, take the right arm up. And then revolved triangle. Again, you could just leave the pose and move through a vinyasa to get back to down dog, or you can take revolved triangle by bringing your hand forward into revolve half moon, lifting the back leg up. And then from here, well, what if you bent your knee and reached back with your hand for your foot? So this I like because it kind of almost gives a theme to the sequence. We worked dancer pose where we pulled the heel away from the hip, and now we've got a similar action going here in this revolve half moon pose with the bend. Now at some point, you're gonna have to step back. So find your way through vinyasa. And we'll take downward facing dog. So sequencing is fun if you kind of keep going on your journey, but eventually you need to be able to retrace your steps because you want to do the same thing on the other leg. And let's go ahead and do that here just because we want to kind of keep some balance. So what did we do the first time? We lifted the left leg up. We lifted the right leg up. Now we'll lift the left, step it forward. Come to warrior one, inhale. Now, your body figured out how to go through that first sequence, so it probably also will be able to figure out how to go to the second sequence, even though it hasn't done it on this side. So you kind of got to rely on that sense to be there again when you regenerate the sequence on side two, so you don't forget parts of it. So we went to dancer pose. Lean forward, grab that back foot, and lift up and find a bit of a back bend here. Now we remember, oh yeah, from dancer pose, I bent at my hip. And I'm gonna fold and try to take those left fingers down. Lift the foot up. And the pose that you're in will remind you of the pose that comes next. And then you can let go of that back foot. And oh yeah, we've got this straight front leg, so we're gonna play on that to come to pyramid fold. Fold over that left leg. And then from here, pyramid, easily moving into revolve triangle, right fingers down, left arm up. All right, and now we've got this twisting thing going. We can take this to revolve half moon by walking the fingers forward and leaning our weight, lifting the back foot. And then remember we did that quirky variation, bending the knee. See if you can reach the foot. Pull the heel away from the hip. Relating back to dancer pose. And then That was all we did on that side sequence. Take a vinyasa. And you don't have to take vinyasas between, but again, I think this is kind of a nice, familiar transition. It brings us back to our down dog hub where we can continue on. Take the right leg up on an inhale again. Exhale, step it forward between the hands. Inhale, warrior one. Where else can we go? Arms out, left arm under, wind the arms, lift the elbows. We can go towards eagle pose. So again, we're relying on this front leg and we're letting the back leg change. We're going to keep that front knee bent into going into eagle pose. We're going to pick up the back leg and now we're going to cross the thigh over. Maybe toes tuck, lift the elbows, sink the hips. Now, of course, from here, we can step back to warrior one, or what if we keep that front foot where it is, keep the knee bent, just unwind. You can go right to chair pose. Now, chair pose, you can go into vinyasa, or maybe we can take a twist here. Left elbow outside of the knee, press the top palm down. Twist. And then from here, we've got options. So we can just come right out of it, go back where we came from, or you could step your left foot back, coming to a high lunge twist, fly the arms open. Start to let yourself get a little creative if you want to. Float up, stretch back. Now from here, we could go right back to warrior one. We could pivot around and take warrior two. We could take the left hand down, take the right arm up. Nice easy twist in a high lunge. We're in crescent pose or high lunge with the back heel lifted as opposed to warrior one. And then this is a transition that I actually really love. From here, we're going to keep the upper body and move to side plank. So you're going to roll to the outer edge of your back foot and step that right foot back, lift the hips. So start to think, what part can I keep? What part is going to move? And that's going to help you to find some interesting transitions that's going to create your sequence. And then from here, side plank easily turns back into plank. Take a vinyasa. And breathe. Let's do that on the other side again, just to keep a little bit of balance. Inhale, left leg up. Exhale, step it forward. Let's maybe change it up this time. Back heel's gonna go down, inhale. We're gonna go to eagle pose again. So arms out. This time the right arm's gonna go under the left. Lift the elbows. Lean forward, right leg goes over left. Maybe tuck the toes. Lift the elbows, sink the hips. And then let's go again, let's take chair one more time. So we're gonna do some of the same bits here. Feet together, knees together, reach the arms up. And we're gonna take a twist again to the left side this time. So right elbow outside the left knee, left palm presses. And then let's step that right foot back. So we're going in the same path that we took the first time. Fly the arms. Now float up, extend the arms. So last time, of course, we put the hand down and went to side plank, but the other option would be to, well, we could go to crescent, we could go to warrior one by pivoting the heel down, but I like this one too. What if you just rotate the whole torso? Rotate around, pivot the back heel down. You're in warrior two. Your body may have different ideas about where to go next, but let it really explore and try things out so that you don't feel like you're locked into this pose must go to this pose. And the only way to get to this pose is from here. Let's take a reverse warrior. And then let's take a vinyasa here. At some point, you just have to let yourself end the sequence and move on. Let's breathe in down dog a couple of times. As always, it's a resting pose. If all else fails, spend some time in down dog and don't regret it. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, step, walk, or hop the feet to the top of your mat. Take a half lift. and fold and chair. Let yourself rely on some sequences that you already know, that you already have in your muscle memory, so that you're not necessarily creating every new sequence fresh. Let's take the feet nice and wide. Hands to the hips. Prasarita Padottanasana. Nice wide-legged forward fold. Hands come to the floor between the feet. Let the head hang heavy. Lift the quads, let the heels be light. So we know this pose. Again, this is a classic standing pose. It's symmetrical as well. Now from here, if your head comes to the floor, you could take a headstand. So if that's something you feel like adding to your practice, you could try that. You can take a twist from here, taking your left hand to your right leg, taking the right arm up and opening. This is obviously asymmetrical, so we want to go to the other side as well. And then from wherever we're at some point we will come back up. You can take another variation of Prasarita. This is another really great transition pose because we can turn the feet open, going to a warrior two, going to a triangle, going to an extended side angle. There's a lot of options. We can turn both sets of toes out a little bit, bend the knees towards the toes, sink the hips down. Let yourself just see. So even if this was your hub pose and you just went from side to side, what if you just did a high lunge here and then just pivoted the feet around and did a high lunge on the other side? And then came up, maybe did a second variation of Prasarita, shoulder blades together. Let yourself fold again, get a shoulder stretch here. Press the feet down, rise up. Turn the right toes open. We can take a triangle pose here. Triangle comes out of Prasarita really nicely because the legs are straight in both poses. And then maybe triangle moves to half moon. You can bend that front knee a little bit to reach the fingers forward, float into it. Half moon has some directions it can go. So we can just step back to triangle, we could step back to an extended side angle, or we could fold to like a standing split. Fold your torso in, lift your leg higher. And then from here, you can step the foot back, and then you've got some options. Anytime that back foot goes back, you could straighten the front leg, you could lower the back knee down, you could come up for a lunge. So let yourself find what makes sense next. Maybe extend that knee. You can come on up for a lunge here. Maybe open the foot wider, sink your body down. Or you could even, instead of walking the foot open to the right, you could scooch that foot over to the left, lower your knee, and take a pigeon stretch here. Let's take a couple breaths in pigeon, why not? And after we've done a lot of standing poses, we may want to start to think of how we can transition to some deeper stretching poses as opposed to, okay, well, I'm stuck in standing poses. How do I get out of them? Okay, and then pigeon, we're going to go back to down dog. Now we know that we somehow need to get back to where we were before, but let's just see how that plays out. So don't feel panicked or worried or like you need to directly go back up to Prasarita and take the same poses on the other side. We can go back to down dog, shake out the right leg for a moment if you like, and we're not doing the left leg right now because that came from another sequence, although we could and find another way to get those other poses. Let's look forward, inhale, exhale, step, walk, or hop the feet. Take a half lift and fold, and we're gonna take chair pose again. Now chair pose, we can come right up to standing, or we can also go the other way and let the hips come down and go from chair pose into boat pose, Navasana. Again, we're kind of going another route, but we know we're gonna somehow make our way back just because we always have poses. There are always more poses we can try to get us where we're heading. So yeah, from here, from boat, well then you can just bring your feet back to the ground, use your hands if you need to, come back to chair, and now straighten the legs. So we just kind of got another one in there without really disrupting our flow. Let's take the feet out wide. Let's turn the left toes open, and we know where we're going now, triangle. And use your body to kind of remind you, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I did the first time. So that is in some ways challenging. If we do sort of wild and crazy sequences, we can find our way there. Can we find our way there again on the other side? Yes, that might take some practice too. And then we took triangle to half moon pose. Stepping forward off of that foot, top arm up. And then once we were here, we thought, well, I have a couple options. I could take my back foot, my lifted foot back down, or I could take my lifted hand down. And that's what we tried. So we did a standing split here, folding in. Now from here, stepping that back foot down. So many possibilities from here. So this time, what we did on the right side was we moved to pigeon stretch by just kind of scooching the left foot, or the right foot over on the other side, but foot over to the other side of the mat, lowering the knee down. And let's take a pigeon stretch on this side. Folding down. Breathing. And at this point, our energy, because we're going into like a deep stretch like this, is telling us we're getting to the point of starting to wind down. And we're going to think about how to transition from standing poses to finishing poses, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, includes things like back bends and twists and forward folds. Hip openers are also great finishing poses. Something like pigeon actually is both a hip opener and a forward fold, so we can feel that sort of inward closing focus. Okay, so from here we stepped back to down dog and gave ourselves a moment to kick out the left leg. And then we inhale, look forward, exhale, step or hop. Let's do the same thing we did on the other side, because we do a half lift and fold and share. And then the hips are going to come down because we remember we want to start to come to the floor now. So this was a good way to get to the floor. So we're going to take boat pose again, Navasana. And repeating poses, even if it's a symmetrical pose, is I think a great idea, especially when it's something like a core pose or like a back bend. Taking a couple, maybe more than one, I think can be really useful. Now, instead of coming back up to our feet, we're just going to lower down to the floor. And here we are, right where we would need to be for a bridge pose. Let's take a good bridge here. So lift the hips, draw the shoulders underneath you, and now we're in a back bend. Yep, you could take a wheel, of course, instead. And if you feel like working with any variations here, so you could go into wheel, you could really strong through the feet, you could bring a knee in and straighten the leg up to the ceiling, bend the knee, put the foot back down, make sure you do the other side. So once you're in a pose, think about, well, what does my body feel like doing? Does it just feel like holding the pose and coming down? Great. Does it feel like doing something a little bit more? Great. Listen, and then lower on down. And you could take another back bend here. From your back, once again, you've got possibilities. So you could bring your knees in and roll them around a little bit, letting the low back smush into the ground. You could take a happy baby by bending the knees here. You could take the legs up and over, taking a plow pose, or maybe going into a shoulder stand. So inversions, we haven't really even gotten into, but this might be a chance to take those if you haven't done them already. Legs up, just simply like this, actually gives you a little bit of an inversion experience without it being too intense. You could certainly bring the knees into the chest and take a nice supine twist. So let's do that for now. So arms out, let's drop the knees to the right, turn the head back to the left. And this may not seem like the most creative option, but again, you don't have to do the most wild thing every time. Find something that feels familiar and feels right to you. And then if you find something creative, enjoy that too. And then bringing the knees back through center, drop them to the floor the other way. Turn your head back to the right with the knees to the left. And then bringing the knees in. Again, any poses that you want to do on your back while you're down, this is a great time to do them. So even like a Supta Baddha Konasana, you could do that while you're here. Since, the transition, it's logical, it makes sense. Your body is right there ready to do it. But if you're ready to come back up, well, you can just kind of, bring yourself up using your arms, or you could roll yourself up. And I also love rolling up straight to a boat pose. We've done a couple boat poses already, but then we can find one last one just by rolling right into it. So again, we keep that flow and there's sort of that continuity. Like we remember where we were last time we were sitting. And then if you want to add on from here, maybe grab the feet, extend those legs up if you can. And then from here, while you have the feet, you could just lower your legs back down or maybe bring the heels in and come to a nice little Baddha Konasana here. And now we're starting to get into some deeper finishing poses, our back bends, our twists, and now let's move towards forward folds. The other thing we could do while we're sitting and we're like, oh, you know what, I didn't do an inversion. Oh, I didn't do any arm balances. Well, we could bring our knees in, come to our feet, come to a squat, and just lean into a crow pose here. So this might be a good place to just insert it into your practice. Find a way to come in. If you're playing with arm balances, give it a try. And then from here, you can sit back down, or you could also just let the feet come to the floor. And since we just put some weight on the wrists, maybe it seems like, oh, I could straighten up my legs and take like a Padahastasana here. That's a forward fold. It's a wrist releaser, makes a little bit of sense. Let your head hang down. And since we are near the end of the practice, you might have a chance to really open the hamstrings by drawing the torso in towards the legs. And at some point, you're going to be ready to end your practice. So at that point, allow yourself to lower down. And there are a variety of forward folds that you can take. And it really doesn't matter which one. If you want to stretch both legs together, you can take Paschimottanasana. If you have a little more time and you want to do one leg at a time, you could do a Jani Shirshasana here. Or you could even take your legs out wide and work in Upavishta Konasana. Let's take Jani Shirshasana today, just because I think we want to have for ourselves a complete practice, even though this has been more about exploring than about, having a full practice experience. But we do want our bodies to have that, even if our minds have been more at work than they often are in a yoga practice. Let your upper body sink down. And then coming up. And as you're working on your own home yoga practice, the length of time that you hold poses is in some ways going to depend on the intensity of the pose. Let's take Jani Shirshasana on the other side here. So with standing poses, I think 5 breaths is a great number, but some really intense, like if you're in a really challenging standing balance pose, Staying for 2 or 3 breaths might be your max. When we come to some of these deeper folds, like a pigeon stretch or a forward fold or even a twist, you can hold 10 even more breaths sometimes to really allow those muscles to know they're stretching, since that's really all we're doing is stretching there. We're not, relying on stamina to keep us in the pose. And then come on up. So as I mentioned in my previous video, I also encourage you to take a little time in Shavasana at the end of each and every practice. I admit I don't always take a lot of time to do it, especially if it's a really short practice. But even a little bit of time to really just seal your practice and close it out for yourself to help you transition and let go of the practice, but also let go of maybe any strain or effort that you used through the practice, so that your body is letting go as well as your mind letting go. So give yourself some time there. Let yourself lay on your mat. Maybe close your eyes, even if it's just a minute. Focusing on your breath. All right. So at the very end here, I just wanted to give a couple of my tips or suggestions for maintaining your own home yoga practice. So I think it's all well and good to know what to do, but I think keeping a practice going is another challenge. So the first thing I wanted to suggest is be realistic with how often you think you can practice. Now, I know that some people will say, hey, practice every day. But if you think the only way to do a home yoga practice is by practicing every day and then you miss a day, you might just give up, right? So be realistic about how many days you want to practice. And then if you set your goal at like 3 or 4 times a week and you only do 2, that's still successful. So you're still building momentum, you're still allowing yourself to carry on. So the amount or the frequency of your practices isn't probably as important as literally finding a sustainable amount of time. And that includes the length of your practice as well. So if you are convinced that you have to practice for an hour every time you practice or it's not worth it, I encourage you to challenge that. When I teach classes at a yoga studio, usually I will teach for an hour, and students have shown up, they've taken time out of their day, they've driven there, they've changed clothes, they've done all of that, and they're prepared for that period of time. But in a home yoga practice, it may be realistic for you to say, I'm going to practice for 25 minutes on this day, and you can do a complete yoga practice in 25 minutes. Of course, it's not as long, it's not going to include as many poses, but it's still worth doing even if it's a shorter practice. The second thing I want to mention is the idea of practice hygiene. And this is sort of along the lines of like sleep hygiene, setting yourself up for a good practice. We may not have the perfect space in our home to practice, but you want to have a space that's pretty quick and easy to set up. So it should involve probably no more than unrolling your yoga mat so that you don't have to spend a lot of time creating that space, or if you have to spend 5 to 10 minutes, you may just not even bother doing it. That said, if there are a few things that you like to add to your practice that really enhance it, like turning on some good music or lighting a candle, if that puts you in the frame of mind to practice, you can use those things to your advantage. But you don't have to if you feel like it's a lot of work to add some of those components. And then finally, I do want to recommend that if you have a home yoga practice, every once in a while, do also take a class with someone else. That can just help to change our patterns, break up our own personal routine. The same as I always recommend that if you're practicing with one yoga teacher all the time, it can be really useful to get experience with different yoga teachers. I think if you are your own yoga instructor, it can also be useful to get some input from other yoga teachers. So whether that's going to a class in person or taking a class from another instructor online, it's going to spark some ideas in your mind. It's going to get your body moving in ways that maybe aren't habitual for you. It's going to allow you to bring more back to your own practice when you go back to your own mat in your own time, in your own way. I hope this has been helpful for you. I enjoyed sharing my thoughts on this subject. I've been practicing yoga for a long time. I've been teaching for over a decade, and a lot of these ideas about structure and sequencing are ones that I use to build classes that I teach to others as well. So I'm happy to share them with you, and if you have any other questions or comments, please let me know. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you join me for some more practices at some point in the future. Let's go ahead and close together with each other. So bring your palms together in front of the heart, close your eyes, tune into your breath. The light in me recognizes and honors the light in you wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing this practice. Namaste.